Night clung to the Blackwater like oil, and the oars licked at it in small, noiseless strokes. The skiff slid beneath the shadow of Aegon's high hill, past the toothy silhouette of what remained of the chain towers, and the man hunched in the stern kept his eyes where the current broke into weak silver under the pilings. He had wrapped his right hand in leather and burlap so that the moon would not set a cold fire to the gold. Under the hood his hair was the color of old straw, and it smelled of the salt the river sweated out of itself. He breathed through his mouth and counted his breaths as if they were steps on a staircase he could not yet see. "Here," the boy at the oars whispered, as if the black water could overhear. His teeth were too large for his jaw, and his wrists were twigs. He nosed the skiff toward a dark, low entrance where the city's bowels bled into the river. A slime of moss and tallow grease glinted on the stones. The man pulled aside the hood, let the air of the city reach him. The reek of tanneries, last night's cookfires, the sour sweetness of spilt wine, the faint medicinal tang that had haunted the alleys since another queen's rage had turned a sept to emerald flame. Under it all was the smell he knew from boyhood, the breath of King's Landing itself. Fish and iron and humanity and hot stone. He swallowed it like a tonic that might yet make him whole. "You don't know me," he said to the boy. "If anyone asks." The boy squinted in the dark. "A mummer with a costly glove, my lord. No more." He took the weight of the coin without looking, and for an instant his fingers brushed the burrs on the burlap. "It shines," he added, in a tone that made it a secret between them. "Keep your head down," the man said. He slid into the sluice mouth and was swallowed at once by the city's damp throat. He had learned the city as a boy, a Lannister fostered in the Red Keep, a page who brought wine to lords and oil to hinges. There were tunnels known to the cat and the rat, and others known to Pycelle and to Varys and to the men who had clawed their way out of one king's hunger and another's fear. Tyrion had spoken to him in a tent lit by a single lantern, the day before he rode south, hands flat against the table, as if he could pin his brother in place with the pressure of guilt alone. "If you love her," Tyrion had said, voice scabbed over by weariness and wine, "you will make her run. If you love anyone else, you will make her yield." Jaime had smiled then, out of habit, out of the pride that comes from being the only man in the world who can say, "I have stood tallest in an ocean of swords." "You expect more from me than I have to give." "I expect the same thing you gave once," Tyrion said. "The city remembers the name they gave you. Give them a reason to say it softer." Now Jaime listened for rats in the water and found only the scratch of his own boots on the stones. He moved by memory and the small stuttering light of a shuttered lamp, keeping his breaths thin, like thread pulled through a stubborn eye. 1, 2, 3. The sluice opened into a culvert he knew, and that culvert into another tunnel whose moist bricks had been set when Aegon's first grandson was a boy. He came up in a stagnant cistern beneath an old storehouse and pried up the warped planks one by one until the air above breathed on him. He pushed his lamp through and followed, shoulders complaining, hips stem-bruised by the rim, and found himself in the hush of a room abandoned after the fire that had chewed one side of it like a dog with a bone. Bottles had burst on the floor years ago, but you could still smell the stick of their liquor. A hammer struck stone somewhere above. A horse pissed in a courtyard. Something in the Red Keep groaned in its sleep, the long hinge sigh of iron that never fully lay down. He made for the stairs. He used to own these stairs. His feet had flown over them in youth, when his legs were infallible and his blood thought that the world owed it all its open doors. The step worn to a scooped dish at the bend remembered him. There were guards, of course. Whether Lannister men or Sellswords in colors the city hadn't seen before, he did not stop to know. The leather had been wrapped around more than his hand for the journey. It padded the gold to blunt the glint, muffled his fist when he used it. The first man he came to was drowsing, chin on breast. Jaime laid a gentler hand on the man's throat than he deserved, pressing just long enough to starve the brain, and eased him to the floor. He was not here to kill men like this. If he failed, there would be killing enough for 1,000 Jaimes. In the long gallery that ran the length of the keep's southern face, the dawn was crawling up through the lattice, square by square. On the river, the masts were foresting with pennons he did not recognize, and further out, where the walls met the sky, the world was a white blur of gulls. He walked past the painted floor map of Westeros, the one Cersei had ordered men to kneel upon so they would feel the realm under their boots. Dust laid its thin veil over the reach over Dorne, but the crownlands had been kept clean by the swish of her gown. He put his boot on Casterly Rock and stood there, a heartbeat, balanced between map and life. Ser Jaime. He did not start like a guilty man. He turned slowly, as if he had been called 100 times at this hour, in this place, and found the ex-maester's pale eyes descending on him as though from a height. Qyburn wore neatness like a penitent's hair shirt and smelled faintly of men who had not been living all the way to the edges of their skin. "You walk like a living whisper," Qyburn went on. "The servants have a word for those who come and go without having once arrived." "And what word is that?" "Ghost." Qyburn smiled without his eyes. "I had thought yours lay to rest in the snows of the north." "The north is generous," Jaime said. "They returned me. Alone." Qyburn's gaze dropped to the leather-wrapped hand. "Nearly." Jaime did not accept the bait. "Where is she?" "Where a queen becomes a queen," Qyburn answered. "Amid the stones." He tilted his head, just enough. "There are preparations yet. The city requires a certain art to be saved." "You mean burned," Jaime said. He heard the weight in his own voice, the anchor-thick drag of something tired of pretending it was light. Qyburn's eyebrows rose, mild. "Fire takes what it will, Ser, but it clears the way. Disease burrows its tunnels through a body until only flame can make it whole. I am a physician. I act in mercy." "You cut away rot," Jaime said. His mouth had gone dry. "This is not a limb. This is a realm," Qyburn said. "And rot can be subtle. It can smile on you and speak in honey and then set a dragon on your roof." He would have to find the fuse and pinch it closed with his fingers. He saw girls in flea bottom roasting rats, and the rat fat dripping little fires into the wood beneath. He saw a boy standing on the balustrade over the lion gate, not yet sure if he meant to jump or only to look. He saw the backs of 1,000 heads at the Great September, the day he had waited for Cersei, and 100 of them had not turned into the air like wild birds because they no longer had faces to turn, because they had been made into a kind of glass through which light passed once and then never again. "Where?" he said. Qyburn spread his hands. "Under the streets, under your feet, under our enemies. Where else?" He frowned at a fleck of dust that had had the temerity to land on his sleeve. "We have always kept a certain supply against the needs of the city. Your late queen found uses for it. The guild has been, shall we say, industrious at the royal behest. My contribution has been to organize their industry." "Organize," Jaime repeated softly, "like pus in neat little jars." "Your brother," Qyburn said as if reciting from a text, "believes in gesture, bells and mercy and the softening of hearts. I have always admired a heart that stiffens under strain. It is how it does not break that interests me." His voice, so soft, thinned further, stretching toward confidence. "Your sister is not yet ready to depart. The city will defend her, if it must be by burning away those neighborhoods that form a contagion of treason. Then so be it. Sacrifice is rarely made by those who require it," Jaime said. He stepped close enough to smell the soap on Qyburn's hands. "If the bells ring, will you stay your hand?" Qyburn considered. His eyes were not made to soften. "When men do not believe you will carry a threat to its conclusion, all threats fail. I do what is necessary. You do as she tells you." "I do as the times dictate," Qyburn said. He disappeared himself with theater in a side passage, folding into the half-shadow the way a blade slides home. Jaime watched him go as if watching a shadow sulk back into a man, and then he moved. The hall beyond the map room would take him to the Queen's Solar and the bedchamber where the windows had been rebuilt as if nothing had happened to a girl with gold hair and a city that day. His boots made no sound on the stone where 1,000 others had clattered. A girl with a pitcher bowed and did not look up. A boy ran with a tray of small loaves and pretended not to notice the lion on his cloak. The keepstones ticked as they cooled from a day of sun, and somewhere deeper in, something pulsed with another heat. He smelled it now, beneath the ordinary breaths of a waking castle. A sweetness that did not belong to bread or wine, a dangerous honey. He found her in the room with the high windows, the one that looked down upon the city as if it had been set there for her alone. Her hair had been coiled in a fashion he remembered from a happier court. She was not wearing mourning. She did not need to anymore. Grief had become her natural complexion. On the table at her side were papers and a cup and a delicate oval of metal fixed with green enamel. When she lifted her hand from it, it shone as if something inside it had been waiting to be warmed. "You found your way back," Cersei said. Her voice did not attempt surprise. She touched the enamel again with idle fingers and the green lit her skin. "My brave knight, my faithless one. I meant to be both," he said. He let his eyes take her all the way in and did not pretend he had come here as a stranger to her body. "You look well." "I do not," she said. "It is unseemly to lie to a queen." "I didn't come to lie." "No," she took up the cup and sipped, lips leaving a pale print. "You've never been better at that than your brother. Tyrion lies well. He lies like a man building a bridge in the rain." She studied him over the rim. "Was he the one who told you where the leaks are?" "He told me to save you," Jaime said. "He told me to get you out. He told me the bells." "The bells," she said, with contempt light enough to be flirtation. "Do you know what bells ring for in this city? For weddings, for deaths, for fires, for surrender. We put all our hopes in noises because it is easier to make a sound than a choice." "Make the choice," he said. "Yield." "Cersei." She smiled. "To whom?" "To life," he said, and startled himself with it. "To the people you rule. To whatever comes next that isn't ash." "You think there is anything that comes after ash?" She set down the cup. "I was queen of 7 kingdoms once, and I burned a church to kill a girl and a crow and 100 hypocrites in lace. You pitied me for that. You loved me for it. I hated you for it," he said quietly. "And I loved you anyway. That is what you made of me." She turned her head. There was no one else in the room. The guards were at a respectable distance. She had always liked to be private for the important cruelties. "You came to take me away from my home, from my throne, from my child." His heart gave one doomed kick against the cage of his chest that had never felt quite big enough for his wants. "Is there a child?" She let him see the faintest change in her face, like a ripple in a bowl when a mouse drinks. "There was," she said. "There will be." She brushed a knuckle over her belly, so lightly it could have been a habit. "Will you carry me like a sack over your shoulder, Kingslayer? Will you toss your queen into a boat while our enemies look on and call that mercy?" "I slept in the snow," he said, "and learned the North can be a better bed than a golden one if you leave your pride at the door. Pride never kept anyone warm." He moved nearer, letting her feel the weight of him, the familiar nearness of a body that had fitted itself to hers since childhood. "Come with me." "You mean run," she said. "Do you know what my father taught me about running? It is what prey does. You are my best hound, Jaime. Don't ask me to be a deer. You have another choice." He did not look at the green oval on the table. The scent under the room's perfumes was stronger here, a sweet that curled up the nose and made a warning place in the brain. "Stay. Yield. Make the bells mean what they ought to." "Daenerys killed my child," Cersei said, and for a heartbeat he saw something raw as bone. "She killed him when she took my name from me and put me in a cell full of smoke and screams and made the city tremble. She killed him when she burned my fleet and cut the throat of the man who might have." She stopped herself with a small, precise swallow. She was never careless with her face for long. "She does not know how to lose. Neither do I." He could have tried to take the oval from the table and toss it into the fire and stomp whatever spider lay within it into paste under his heel, but he did not know what the device would do, and he had learned through bleeds and bruises that it was better to know the shape of a trap than to spring it with your boot. He took another step and saw, as if arriving in the present from a long road, the truth that he had been walking toward since the day he put his sword through a mad king's back. Some men are born to carry water and some to carry fire, and some are born to take fire from the hands of those who would fling it at the world and hold it in their own until it goes out. Cersei, he said, and the name was a prayer and a curse. This will kill them. If it must, she said with almost gentleness, they will die as my subjects, not as hers. You'll kill me too, he said. Her eyes flicked to his hand. I thought you already had. He moved before he gave himself permission to move. He had learned long ago that asking his conscience was often asking for a refusal. He stepped into her, to the place where her breath touched his cheek, and took her by the forearms. Not hard, not yet. Not until some part of him had heard a bell that had never been mounted in a tower, a bell he had carried in his ribs since boyhood. It rang now, tolling in him with a clean, enormous sound. Do you remember? He said. The first time you asked me to do something I wanted to do? She smiled, puzzled, the corners of her mouth mouse-quick. We were children, Jaime. Children want everything. You asked me to push a boy out a window because you were afraid. You told me you were not afraid. He tasted his own breath coming back to him. I did it. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was destiny. I told myself 100 things. None of them were true. He lifted his right arm and loosed the burlap and leather from his hand. The light from the window took the gold and made it warm as bread. He put the gold on one side of her throat, the left, and his flesh hand on the other. Her pulse felt like a wing beat, a small frantic thing that did not know it belonged to a hawk. Jaime, she said, and in that single word she laid down all the sharp things she had been holding up between them for years. She said his name like a woman who had never had a better one to say. She did not push at him. She did not claw. She did not scream for the mountain, and the mountain did not come. There was a quiet in the corridor outside that felt like the hush before curtains rise in a theater. He pressed. The golden fingers did not feel, but they gripped as well as any man's, and his left hand felt the heat of her skin and the tendons ridging as if they wished to rise from the meat and flee. Her eyes were on his, green as the enamel, green as the fire. His own eyes were full of 100 days. The day he first put on white and thought it would stay clean. The day he tumbled a queen in a tower full of old swallows' nests. The day he opened a king like a wineskin and watched him die and smelled the stink of piss and wildfire in his last breath. He pressed as she had pressed a seal into wax. Her lips parted. She did not ask for mercy. She had not, after all, been born to be prey. At the end, she looked surprised. He had thought she would be angry, or that she would watch him as if even this were a game. But she looked like a woman opening a door she had knocked upon for years without believing it would ever be unlocked. When she was gone, she weighed less than the chain around his shoulders. He laid her on the floor with care. He covered her with the white fur he had worn north when he learned that vows outlive weather and pride alike. He did not kiss her. The stink of wildfire was stronger now, or else he had torn the cork from whatever kept it at bay. He took the enamel oval and slipped it inside his shirt. It lay there like a coin in a beggar's mouth. Something shook the keep. A sound like a mountain coughing rolled through the air, and dust pilled the sunlight. He went to the window and there was the dragon, black against the morning, tearing the air as a man tears cloth. The scorpions smiled their iron smiles from the walls, but they were too few and too slow. A gout of orange dragged green after it, and the ships in the harbor became candles in a boy's feast day dream. He left Cersei on the floor with his cloak over her, and the keep breathed on him as if it had always known this part of his story. He made for the stair that curled like a cat's tail up to the Hand's Tower. Qyburn had spoken of industry, of organization. Industry had corridors and keys and men whose oil kept the wheels from crying. He took 3 stairs at a time and cut left where he knew there would be 2 doors, one false and one real, and opened the real one to find a room that smelled like what lay in the sewers when a tannery's vat's overturned. A sweetness that made the nostrils ache. On the table were 3 more of the enamel ovals, and beyond them a row of little clay jars banded in green. The tops were sealed with wax embossed with 7 pointed stars. which was meant to be a jest. A boy in gray robes looked up, saw the lion, and squeaked, clasping his hands over his chest as though a heart could be held in by fingers. "Where are the fuses?" Jaime said. The boy stammered in a tongue of learned words that had grown fat sitting indoors. Jaime picked up one of the ovals and thumbed the catch that was no catch at all but only a pivot, and the cover snapped back on a stiff little hinge. Inside was a metal tongue poised between two teeth that would spark when pressed together, and a well beneath where a paste the color of coral waited like a patient snake. "Don't," breathed the boy. "Not that one," Jaime said. He closed it gently and slid it into his belt. "Where?" The boy's eyes panned to the far door. Qyburn stood in it with his hands folded and his head cocked, as if he were looking at an unexpected specimen in a jar. "I wondered how long it would be," Qyburn said. "If one lives long enough, one sees a pattern in even the most capricious men. Here you are again." "And here you are," Jaime said. Qyburn entered, the skirts of his black robe whispering as though he had brought a coal in his pocket. A pair of iron keys hung at his belt and a small hammer on a loop. He moved to the table and set one fingertip on a clay jar, like a priest laying blessing on a brow. "It is not necessary that you understand," he said. "It is only necessary that you trust me." "I did once," Jaime said, "when you told me what you cut from my brother would cure my sister's grief." "Ah." Qyburn's tone was mild, approving. "You do remember." A shout in the corridor, and a shadow filled the door behind Qyburn like a storm cloud. Ser Gregor's armor smoldered faintly, as if it had been warmed by a fire beyond any hearth. His helm gave him the head of a thing that does not live in the same world as skin. He stood and waited, making waiting itself into a weapon. "Your sister is indisposed," Jaime said softly. Qyburn twitched an eyelid. "Her Majesty is persevering." "She's dead," Jaime said, and the more he said it, the more the shape of it settled into him, like a stone at last finding the place it had been meant to weigh down. "I did it. I will do it again in any song that needs singing." Qyburn's face pinched with something like hurt. "You always were a butcher operating without the kindness to call himself a surgeon."
Ser Gregor.
The mountain moved forward. Jaime took down the small hammer from Qyburn's belt as he passed and flung it at the enamel on the table. The hammerhead kissed the hinge, the lid flew, and the metal tongue scraped the tooth and spat a spark that was gray and unimpressive until it sank into the coral paste and woke a hungry thing. The boy screamed. Qyburn actually flinched. Jaime grabbed the nearest clay jar and hurled it into the iron belly of the brazier standing ready in the corner with tongs like a spider. The jar broke. The smell that leapt into the room was a hand shoved down his throat. "Water," the boy babbled. "Sand," Qyburn shrieked, his voice, for once, not calm at all. "Sand." The mountain took one broad step toward the brazier, lifted it with one hand and heaved it through the open shutter. The brazier clanged against the stone on the other side and burst into sparks that made the air crackle. The paste in the broken jar burned a light so green it turned everything into a corpse's dream. It licked at the sill and at the arrow loops as if tasting the keep with a cat's tongue. Jaime smashed two more jars with the flat of his palm so that the paste splat like the yolks of rotten eggs against the far wall where they guttered without finding purchase. He stamped a spark with his boot and felt it through the sole like the kiss of a nail. Qyburn's hands fluttered at his breast as though looking for a rosary he had once owned and sold. "This was precise," he hissed at Jaime. "This was mathematics. You do not know what you are undoing. You could burn us all." "I am trying," Jaime said. The mountain came again, and this time Jaime did not have cleverness. He had only his body and what lived inside it when all the stories about him had gone to sleep. He ducked, and the mountain's gauntlet tore a bite out of the wall's face. Dust howled. Jaime was quick. He had always been quick, even with the golden hand making him half of something he had once been entirely. He slipped past the bulk of the big man and drove his shoulder into Qyburn's chest. The ex-maester stumbled against the table and his hands fell, splaying on the green-banded clay. He looked down at his palms in mild interest, the way a man looks at a stain on his cuff. The mountain moved without being told and took Qyburn by the back of the neck. Jaime saw the non-life in him, how he acted and did not live. The mountain lifted Qyburn as if he weighed less than a thought and dashed him against the floor with an indifference that was almost piety.
Qyburnès que le rend.
It did not stop ringing. The boy screamed again. The mountain looked at Jaime and saw only a target. A sound like another mountain falling came up the stair, and for a second Jaime saw another shape, broad and hunched and made of old fury, and heard a voice that was half bark and half prayer, and then the mountain moved toward that sound and away from the jars and away from the table and away from the man with the gold hand who did not dare breathe until the stair had swallowed both monsters. Jaime took the keys from the dead man's belt. He locked the door to the room and flung the keys out the window after the brazier. He ground the coral paste with his boot heel until his head swam with the smell of it, until the green guttered into thin smoke. He took the enamel devices, 3, and tucked them where they would cut if he moved too fast. He left the boy trembling over the scorch on the sill and went back toward the corridor, toward the stair, toward whatever he had made at last of his life. He did not have a plan beyond stopping men whose plans would kill a city, but sometimes that was all a plan needed to be. He moved through the keep the way light moves under a door at dawn. Slowly at first, then with a rush. He found the bell tower stairs and climbed, climbing until the city spread out beneath him like a great dish of broken mirrors, each one reflecting a different piece of the same misery. He saw the Iron Fleet become a slick of smoke. He saw a line of men in gilded armor at the city gate scatter like beads from a broken thread. He saw the dragon descend in a long, tearing line and the air itself try to follow it. When he reached the bell ropes, the men there were poised with hands on hemp and faces hard. The captain of the guard, an old man with a scar like a finger laid along his cheek, drew his sword. "By the Queen's order," he said. "Which queen?" Jaime asked. "By her who sits," the captain said, and it broke Jaime's heart with its futility. How a man will cling to a pronoun when the noun has been taken from him. "She does not sit," Jaime said softly. "She lies. The bells will ring." The captain searched his face. He found something in it that a soldier recognizes in another soldier when both their lives have been a long apprenticeship to men's lies. He took his hand from the bell rope and gave a fractional nod. The dragon rode the air once more. A far mandolin of iron tried to sing and had its strings torn out. The captain pulled. The bells woke. They awoke like giants forced from bed, bawling, and then, as if remembering their better nature, they steadied, and their voice filled the city in a note that had been made before any of these men were born, before these stones were laid. The bells carried. They washed over the alleys and courtyards, slipped under doors and through shutters, told women to stop packing, told men to stop hiding coins, told children to stand and listen, told soldiers to lay down their spears and the garrison to ground their shields. They struck the dragon, too. Jaime saw it, saw how the great creature's head turned, how it hung in the air with a kind of question under its wings. The rider on its back had hair like frost and a face he had seen once across a long table lit by candles. He could not hear her words at this distance if she spoke them, but he watched the dragon choose to rise rather than to dive, and the breath he had forgotten to take when he throttled the life from Cersei returned to him, a brutal gulp that made him cough. He descended. He had more to do. The enamel ovals were not the only way to bring emerald death to a city. Qyburn had said, "Under the streets, under your feet." Jaime went under the streets. He found, in the first place he looked, men with gray robes and soot on their faces and a sack of the little jars in their arms. He took the sack and the man's breath with a headbutt that reminded his left eye of youth's capacity for stupidity. He took the man's pipe and broke it under his heel, because the smell of a sulking ember now made his stomach fold on itself. He slit the wax seals with his dagger and poured out the paste into puddles that smoldered weakly but did not leap. He took a bucket of sand from a mason's work and smothered the puddles until they became nothing more than strange-colored mud. He found the next place and did it again. He made the corridors of the Undercity his own until his throat was raw and his boots shone with an angry sheen and his hair smelled as if a forest had burned in it. By the time he returned to the palace, the bell's steady call had become part of his own blood's rhythm. The gates had swung open. The Golden Company had ceased to be golden and had become a rumor that would one day be told by old men who had never seen them. Men on the walls called out in voices that could not decide between glee and terror. The city was alive. The city was alive. He told himself it as if it were a spell. He went back to her. He could not keep himself from it, as if some chord in him still believed that a thing placed carefully would remain just so and not move under the indifferent hand of time. She lay as he left her, as if the stone had molded itself to her shape, as if the wolf-furred cloak had grown on her from a pelt that had been waiting for this purpose. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. He thought of their father, that hard-boned man who had believed that to control a thing was to love it properly. He thought of their mother, whose hands had been cool on a fevered brow. He thought of his children, whose names he did not say. He thought, at last, of a girl in blue armor who had looked at him as if the badness he had been told he was might not be all he had to be. Tyrion found him there. Tyrion had lost weight the way a candle loses height. He came into the room as if he had never left it and as if it were foreign. His eyes went to the fur on the floor and the favorite face beneath it, and he stopped as if he had struck a wall. "Jaime," he said. It was all he could say at first. "I told you I would save the city," Jaime said. The words trembled between pride and grief and could not make up their minds. "I didn't mean to do it like this." Tyrion came to the cloak and knelt beside it. He did not touch her. He did not say her name. He stood again with difficulty and wiped his face with the heel of his hand as if a boy. "There will be no songs," he said softly. "There were none the first time," Jaime said. They went together to meet their conquerors, if conquerors was the word for those who took a city that had already bent its head. In the great hall, the red that had once been the Lannisters' boast looked like a wound. The Unsullied entered with feet that struck the floor as if counting it. The Northmen after them, men with dirt in the seams of their hands, men who had known winter well enough to speak of it like a person. Grey Worm's eyes were not a color. Jon Snow came in a cloak like stone. Daenerys Targaryen walked the world like a question that had been waiting too long for an answer. She looked at Jaime and her eyes did not soften. They were made for far-off horizons. "You killed her." He did not make a bow of himself. He was not a bow. "Yes, you killed a queen." "I did." He saw, in the corner of his sight, Tyrion's hands making a shape like a cage and then dropping. "I did it to stop a fire. I have done it before." Daenerys's mouth altered, a breath length. He saw how much she wanted to be merciful. Mercy had been made difficult for her by the world, which had never given her any clean choices. "You do not have the right," she said. "No man has the right to decide who burns." "That is true," Jaime said, "but some men have done it, and I am tired of watching them." He felt the enamel ovals against his ribs and resisted the foolish urge to thrust them at her as proof, as if any proof could be enough. "This will be judged," said Grey Worm. His voice was a stone falling down a well. "I will be judged," Jaime said. "I have been judged since I was 17 years old. The name they gave me stuck faster than any knife." He looked at Jon Snow, and the man's gray eyes did not move. "I am not asking you to like me. I am asking you not to burn the city because of me. I did what I could to lessen the number of ghosts who will share our sleep." Daenerys's hands were small and strong. He had seen them once on the head of a dragon, the way a woman lays a hand on a horse to calm it. She stood a long time without moving, and the court held its breath as if breath were a thing that might offend. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than he had expected. "You saved lives," she said. "You took one I cannot excuse. You have a gift for this." She did not mean saving. She meant the other thing. He nodded without shame. "What will you do with me?" he asked. "Ask him," she said, and tipped her head toward Tyrion. Tyrion started. "Your Grace, You spoke to him," she said. "You told him the bells. You told him to fetch her away. You told him to make me be what I have said I am. I will not be a butcher, Lord Tyrion, but you will tell me what I must be to keep this from happening again." Tyrion let out a breath that shook him like a sail in a hard wind. He looked at Jaime with old love and new fear and the tiredness that comes to men whose words have been stones thrown into seas straight back in their faces. "Send him to where he cannot serve any more kings," Tyrion said. "Send him to a place where vows are the only geography." "The Wall," Grey Worm said, as if spitting out a bone. "The Watch," Tyrion said. "A new watch, perhaps, with more driftwood than trees left to make it from. But a place where his sword may point outward for the first time." "Do you accept this?" Daenerys asked. Jaime did not look up to the ceiling where the tapestries used to hang. He looked at his hands, the gold and the flesh, and found himself full of a tiredness so deep it felt clean. "I accept," he said. "I am not finished," Daenerys said. She walked closer and looked at him with a scrutiny that felt like iron pressed into cloth to smooth it. "You will help rebuild what your house has broken. You will take off the colors of lions and put on the black that hides men and shows them what they are anyway. And if you run, I will find you. I am very good at finding what attempts to slip out of the world's eye." "I won't run," he said, and smiled once, brief as a knife's reflection. Later, when the sun had thrown its flat white light across the smoking city and turned the Blackwater into a sheet of hammered metal, he walked the streets one last time as a man not yet turned into a crow. The small folk shouted at him and blessed him and cursed him and did not look at him at all, the way men and women do when they are trying to make a life out of what is left. He passed a shop where dolls lay like little dead in the window, but one had been propped up already, with a splint on its arm as if someone believed in mending. He crossed by the husk of the September and did not look long. He crossed by a bakery where a bald man gave a child a loaf and took no coin. He went to the room where she lay and found that someone had been there before him. The fur was folded. Her hair had been braided by capable hands that did not love her. A shroud had been begun and then stopped, as if the hands that began it had been called to another task and had answered. He stood there a long while. He did not weep until he saw that a woman had placed a sprig of rue on the ledge and that a bee had come to the room at last and walked on the petals. He left the keep by a door meant for servants. Brienne waited at the foot of the cracked steps. She had come in the night like a force of nature, on a horse that looked as though it had never learned to doubt anything. She wore no colors at all. She had never required them. She looked at him, and he saw in her face that she had known what he had done before any tongue had carried the news to her ear. "You saved them," she said. "I killed her," he answered. She took that in with a breath that lifted her mail and dropped it again like a decision. "Both can be true. She was my..." He stopped. "We were children when we decided what we would be to each other. Children are poor at choosing wisely. You can be a better man," she said, at once flat and like an invitation. "I do not think I will ever be a good one," he said. "I am too practiced at other things." Her gaze dropped to his hand, the gold one, now rep-added with leather. "Your vows don't ask for good," she said, "only for true." He made a sound that could have been laughter in a kinder world. "I have been true to too many people. Be true to only one now," she said. "Be true to what you did when no one was watching." They rode north together until the road split. She reined in. "I cannot go with you," she said. "The realm will need people who can write down what happened truly. Someone will attempt to make it a better story than it was. We must not let them." She took a strip of leather from her pouch and fastened it with quick fingers around the gold at his wrist. It had been cut from an old scabbard and it smelled faintly of oil and rain. "For warmth," she said. He nodded. "Thank you." Her eyes were wet and did not blink. "Thank you," she said. He went on alone, the road unspooling like an old braid, and the land changing from fields to scrub to the hard, clean face of the north. He passed men with faces reddened by wind and women with arms like rope. He slept with his cloak as a pillow and woke with frost in his beard. At Moat Cailin he could smell the sea without seeing it. At the last hearth he saw a wall rebuilt not with pride but with stubbornness, which is a better mortar. At Castle Black, the gate sang on its hinges as if it remembered a better time it had once pivoted for. The wall was diminished. Everyone knew it. It did not care that they knew. It stood as if telling the air that what remains can be as meaningful as what has fallen. The men here were boys and old men and a few who had sought, as he had, a place to stand where their worst days might be turned into work. The black they gave him was only half his size, and he wore it anyway. Someone laughed. He laughed with them. He took off the lion pin from his cloak and handed it to a boy whose mouth hung open. The boy turned it over and over as if it might tell him a story if he spun it fast enough. There is a rhythm to guarding. It is like breathing when breathing has finally ceased to be an act of will. The wind teaches you your limits and then ignores them. Jaime took his turn on the top of the wall where the stones had not fallen and on the ground where the wind dragged salt in from the sea. He mended a gate with his gold hand, braced timbers with his shoulder, taught 3 boys to believe that not dying is a skill worth learning. When he woke shivering from the dream in which Cersei's eyes widened and went still, he went to the yard and made himself hard with work until sweat had rinsed him. He told himself the truth as if it were a prayer. I killed them because I could not let them kill you. A king, a queen, a city full of the unimportant who are what a realm is for. He carried the names like stones in his pockets. They kept him from floating away into the old stories he had told the young man he had been. In spring, which came late and without apology, a raven with a Lannister red ribbon on its leg came to the rookery and cocked its head at him as if he were another bird. He took the letter in cautious hands and carried it to his bunk and opened it alone. It was Tyrion's hand. The lines were thinner now and less sure, but they spoke clearly. You did it, the letter said.
Y.
Oh, you did what you had to, and you made it into something better than a legend because you bothered to stay and stand when the singing had stopped. The Queen speaks of mercy now as if it were a tool she understands how to use. The city has begun to laugh again at night. There are boys who ring bells in the streets to mock their friends. In the markets there are women who bake loaves in the shape of dragons and give them sugar teeth, and children bite the heads off and giggle. Some of that is yours. Do with the knowledge what you can bear. He burned the letter because he had learned to trust the skill of losing things when they had done their work. He stood on the curtain wall that night and listened to the wind tell him not the stories he wanted but the ones he needed to believe. The world did not care about his goodness, cared about its own continuance. He could serve that. When patrol took him east into the haunted places where the trees' bodies tell you what they have seen and refuse to repeat, he found signs of small settlements beyond, free folk who had chosen to stray like deer into the high woods. He met a girl with a scar across her mouth who asked him to strike sparks with his golden hand, and he let her bang a flint against it until she won a star and laughed. When they returned, the commander, a boy from White Harbor with hands too clean, counted them all by name and grinned as if numbers were talismans. In the night, he dreamt of a room with a painted floor and a woman on it who did not accuse him. He dreamed of a city where bells had rung, and he had held his breath and heard, under the big sound, the small one of his own heart deciding not to die. He dreamed of a dragon landing on a parapet and folding its wings like a hillside. He dreamed of a girl in blue and a scarf of leather around a gold hand. Sometimes he dreamed of the Mad King and sometimes of the not Mad Queen, and in those dreams he did not bother defending himself before the court of the dead. He had learned at last that his answers were not for them. On a day when the sun at last found the nerve to show itself more than a rumor, he walked out beyond the wall to a ridge where the snow melted into a trickle that would, given a set of patient months, become a stream and then a river and then the sea. He stood there a long time, long enough to make the wind think he was one of the stones. The sky was as empty as a bowl just washed. He took off his glove and held up the gold to the light. It flashed once like a thought. He put it down and let his other hand feel the cold air, the way a man tests a bath before stepping in. He thought of his father again, of that hard man's belief in what legacy must be. He thought of his own legacy and decided at last that it was a city full of people who woke in the morning and clipped their fingernails and fought with their sisters and kissed their babies and bought onions and cursed their king in peace. He turned back to the wall. A boy on the gate waved, hopping from foot to make himself taller. Jaime lifted his hand, flesh and gold both, and waved back. Then he went inside to put on his black cloak and take his turn where the world bent and threatened to break. and to hold it steady a while with the weight of his body and what he had learned to be true.